live, apparently. Let's see how this is going. Ooh, that seems to be okay and seems to be alright in the orange. Diddly. Hadley! How are we all doing today? Oh, that light is bright. Alright, I'm going to have to turn the light down a bit, I'm afraid. I will start responding to the chat in a second, but the light's going down first. By gum. Oh, that is better. Oh, that's better. Oh. Yes, sorry, tonight teaching decided to overrun for ages. Hence Iron Brew was started early. But we survived. Barely speaking. Let's see, what have I missed? Ooh, and there's a whole chat going on. Hello, Bijon. Hello, Carl von Gasmode. Hello, Dunrick Ironhammer. Hello, Blue Ship Butter. Good afternoon. Let's see. Hello, Jay. Hello, Buccaneer. Hello, Dan Freeman. We've got a lot of discussion going on about various things for Pearl Harbour and the West Coast Main Line. I have to say, in my experience, train to Manchester is okay, but it's always more fun if you can drive up there. Or if when you're up there, you can get a car to drive around. Because there's so much good, nice countryside and not that far outside of Manchester. Seth Thompson, hope you enjoyed my KTG comments. Rolling off. Yeah. Pretty cool. Hello, Concentratus. John Shea, hello. Well, hello, Stafford Thompson. I'm not sure if I said that already. Ooh, good. Nice conversation going on. And let's see. Hello, Buccaneer. Hello, Janewith. Hello, Greg Satowski. Hello, Nautical Wolf. Hello. DGB40. Hello. Peter Dawson. Hello. Ian Carr. Hello. And DM Carpenter. Hello. Now, hello, Carl Harben. And Effin Hund. Hello. Haven't seen you in a while. Hello, Yogi Khan. Hello, Aviator Enterprise. Hello, Concentratinus. Bug Guy 8829. Haven't seen you in a while. Hello. Hope you're well. Samuel Nimitz, hello. What did I miss? I don't think I've seen you before, so hello and welcome. If I haven't seen you before, said welcome, well, there's an extra welcome. And hello, Dan Regano. Do you see torpedo bombers? And hello, Earthborn Gnome. Well, it's going to sound strange, but today is going to be a little bit different from the normal. In that the normal, when you do a Pearl Harbour discussion, and I will probably do one like it next year, is a discussion of actual Pearl Harbour. But one of the things I think that's forgotten or not answered is just how high risk the Japanese operation was. In fact, multiple steps, if luck, General Short, had gone in a slightly different direction, there could have been a whole different circumstance. Okay? And I'm even going to be able to say something positive about Lord Louis Mountbatten. And no one is more shocked about that than me. In fact, I'm almost coming out in hives just thinking about that. Something positive about Lord Louis Mountbatten. Goodness gracious me. Hello, Lionheart X-Ray. Hello, Roland Cash. Hello, Keithron. And, yeah, hope you're well. So, was Pearl Harbour a missed opportunity for the US? Here's the first point I want to do, and I want to clarify this like I did when I did HMAS Sydney, when I'm Amphibian class, and when I've done the other things. This is not about going into conspiracy theories. I don't think there was a massive conspiracy theory to ensure the Japanese took out Pearl Harbour. For starters, if you were going to do a conspiracy theory for that, you would only have a couple of older battleships there, or maybe one of your newer battleships there, and the rest would all be elsewhere, because, this is going to sound terrible, You'd want enough that would give you a casus belli, not enough that would knock you out the war. And a little bit more damage, i.e. if the Japanese had launched the third wave, as they were supposed to, would have knocked America back a considerable way out the war. It has still been fighting, but dang, they'd have been short air defense for their forces and fire support for their marines and all sorts of things. This squad, I'm more shocked than you. Yes. Well, you know, when we say Lord Louis Mountbatten managed to say this, there is a reason he gets to say this. He is sent away by Admiral Cunningham as far away as he can from any fighting, with strict instructions of what to go and tell people. So, you know, basically it's Cunningham using Mountbatten as a spokesperson, okay? It works. The fact that Mountbatten actually delivers what he's supposed to be said, that's a shock! But Mountbatten does manage it. Good luck, Simon Ametz. Enjoy school. Yogi Khan, Japanese missed the Pearl Harbour oil stores too. Yes. There's all so many things they miss that unfortunately mean that if it had been a conspiracy theory, a conspiracy, no. You'd have hit the oil fields, missed the battleships. You can, believe it or not, you can replace oil quicker than you can battleships. Taranto. Let's look at the first one. And this is the thing. Taranto. These are the results of Taranto. We know about the huge, great big massacre vodka almost that the British put into it. We've talked about this, and there are links down below in the description to the various Bilgepumps Taranto episodes. And there are convoys going backwards and forwards. There are airstrikes taking place from HMS Ark Royal in the north, taking out airfields. There is all sorts of stuff going on. And the Royal Navy's brought pretty much the whole fleet in the Mediterranean along for the operation. They're not just sending the carriers, they've brought the whole fleet. Because, guess what? There is a risk if you do the attack and it fails and they come charging out. You're going to have a full fleet battle on your hands. It's a whole massive, complicated thing. In contrast, Pearl Harbour... Okay, yes, it's a peacetime operation, in that both sides think they're at peace. Well, one side thinks they're at peace, the other side thinks the other one thinks they're at peace. But... it has nothing. It has radio silence and distance. The Americans aren't distracted by any other operations going on by the Japanese. In many ways, they're just distracted by their own hubris. And here's the actual quote. And this is where I find it interesting. Okay. In October 1941, Lord Louis Mountbatten visited Pearl Harbour and was giving a lecture to the American naval officers on Royal Navy tactics against the Germans. An officer asked when and how the United States would enter the war. Mountbatten pointed to the Pearl Harbour in his typical grandiose style on the map of the Pacific and said, "Right here." Citing Japan's surprise attack on Port Arthur, the British attack on Taranto. In Washington, he actually warned Admiral Stark about how unprepared the base was against a bomber attack, and Stark replied, "I'm afraid that putting some of your recommendations in effect is going to make your visit out there very expensive for the US Navy." That's October 1941. Now, yes, that's not a long way out, but Taranto happens in November 1940, which is 13 months prior to it. There are their own reports, which they ignore from it, and then there is Lord Louis Mountbatten. It's a case of, there is an old story about a guy on, there's a flood going on, and first of all, he hears on the television there's going to be a flood coming on. He thinks, "I'm fine. I pray to the Lord. I am a good man. I'll be fine." The banks burst. The water starts rising. The radio has an emergency alert. Get out of your house while you still can. Thinks, no. I'm good. I pray to the Lord. I'll be fine. Water keeps rising. Someone comes along in a boat and offers to take him away. And he says, no. You go help someone else. I'm good. I pray to the Lord. I'm fine. Carries on. Eventually, he's up on the roof. A helicopter comes past and drops down a ladder. And he says, no. I'm good. I'm fine. I pray to the Lord. I'll go help someone else. Anyway, he gets swept away and dies. And heaven, at the gates of heaven, he approaches the Lord. He goes to ask the Lord, "Why did you let me die, Lord? I pray to you every day. I follow all the commandments. Why did you let me die?" Lord turns around and says, "I sent you a television report, a radio report, a guy in a boat, and a helicopter. What more did you expect me to do?" It's the same with Pearl Harbour. There are so many different warnings which come through to the US Navy about Pearl Harbor's very weaknesses, and it's a joint structure. So there is so much coming through, and yet they're not, their own institutional inertia is just working against it, because they honestly don't think the Japanese are going to hit them for some reason. For some reason, they think the Japanese are going to roll over and beg. Okay. Dunrakanama. This one needs to be marked for foul language, considering half the he must not be named is mentioned. I'm of the Albus Dumbledore school. If you don't mention Voldemort, then you are giving Voldemort far too much power over you. Dan Freeman, it is sad, given how many summaries have been run out about attacks on Pearl Harbor throughout the 1930s, and with the heightening tensions, US forces weren't at higher state of alert. Yes, we'll be getting to that in a second. That's good. Was Mountbatten went to be on the way to Atto Islands to be put into a very cold exile, and just happened to be passing through Hawaii on 0712? No. Ian Carr, what ships were the Japanese going to prioritize as targets if US carriers were present? Oh, the carriers would have been hit just as much as the battleships, but there again, seeing as they had plenty of time to hit destroyers and cruisers as well as battleships, they could have diverted stuff. And honestly, if the carriers had been present, they would have been the third wave to guarantee they'd hit them. Ironhard X-Ray, is Taranto one of your favourite topics? You seem to get extra excited whenever you bring it up. It is one of the ones I enjoy. Nordic Wolf, yay, no conspiracy theories. I saw enough of those yesterday. Looking forward to this one. It kept me sane. Thank you. There's good. The Kido Batai was fairly safe from retaliation by the battle fleet in Pearl Harbor by being 10 knots faster. Yes, in theory. In theory. Being 10 knots faster in theory will help, but that's only as long as you take out the battleships and you don't get taken out yourself or damaged. Peter Dawson. The US thought the Japanese were capable of attacking two cutouts at the same time, like the Philippines and Singapore, Malaya. They didn't realize they were planning three. Grace Elsie. So basically you're saying any old idiot could see it coming. Gotcha. To an extent. Carl Gasman, and had the Keto Batai enough fuel to run from Pearl instead of sailing away at economical speed? Not really. Well, no. They would have still gone for the battleships. Carriers weren't capital ships. They might have taken a few torps in the first wave, and the dive bombers would go for them over Nevada. There were plenty of aircraft to hit them, and as I said, I think if their carriers had been present, they would have launched the third wave. In fact, I think arguably the reason they don't launch the third wave is for fear that the carriers are not far away and will give them a strike. Wolf 12 of War. Why did Japanese lack a proper AP boom if your carrier is supposed to attack battleship? This seems like an odd gap in capability. Anti-purpose, anti-armor piercing bomb. Who knows? Dan Carter. Hearing you tell a Jerry Cloud story was epic. I was trying. I couldn't give it the same delivery, but I did try. Jimmy Silver, I thought the attack, I think it was, if they attack, they'll hit the Philippines first. That is often the point put across, and there is one of the things we'll be getting to when we talk about radars is because the radar in the Philippines is operating 3 shifts 24 hours a day, and the ones in Pearl Harbour are operating, and Hawaii are operating 4 hours a day. But here's the point. The obvious thing is if they're going to attack anywhere, they're going to attack the Philippines first. That's great. But if you're putting your entire strategic box, i.e., you're doing exactly as the Italians did with Taranto, this is going to be your most important naval base. It's going to have all your fleet in, everything is in there. It's your critical base. I know Clausewitz is sometimes laughed at with this whole point of centers of gravity and all these things, but he does actually make a lot of sense in some regards. And ergo, you've turned Pearl Harbor into the center of gravity for your forces. Why you're not defending it as such? Evening, Andrew Cox. Hi, Jespy. Oh, and by the way, another link down below is a link explaining what the plans are to Patreon, and explaining what the plans are from January onwards. And I'll just add that in quickly here. From January onwards, because of teaching, which I'm going to have, it's going to be a lot more front-loaded, instead of being spread out over 3 or 4 days during the week instead of a couple of hours each day. It's all going to be front-loaded on the Mondays and Tuesdays, and a bit on the Wednesdays. I'm going to go down to a long patrol on Tuesday, and on Thursdays have a live, and Sundays brew ships. So that's going to be the pattern from now on, with Wednesdays having 4 random books. So it's still going to keep sort of roughly 2 topics a week, and but one will come out in long patrol form, one will be live, and there'll be the 4 random books and the brew ships to do sort of the general discussion bits. It's because of the timetabling. It's what next semester's timetable looks like for me, so that's what I'm having to go with. And I might then change around again, depending on what the semester after that looks like. Or on summer holidays, I might add in some more, go back to having some lives, instead of having long patrols, or I might use the time from having the long patrol stacked up to do some research and writing for the next book. So, that's what's coming up. It wasn't just, though, Taranto, which was a big warning of what was going on. Dose God. I watched the Time Go series. Some did, but both the General and Admiral had been asking repeatedly for more air defense capability for Pearl, but had been shut down. Yes and no. Evening, Andrew Cox. Off license. I wonder how things panned out if the Japanese had hit the fuel farm. Yeah. Well, the Americans would be even more dependent on the fuel which Britain had forward based in Australia than they were as it was. Revol not being named. I know it's like mentioning Beetlejuice 3 times in worlds where magic is a reality. Michael Sanderson, as Al Murray said in the routine, the Americans were taken completely by surprise. 2 years into global war. What were they thinking? Yeah. That is one of the points. I like Al Murray. I have to say, I love listening to his podcast. The podcast he does on his history podcast. That's really quite cool. Bud Guy 8829. If the radar warning and or subsidings taken seriously, would that be enough time, or would you need multiple days to make a difference? We'll get to that, and trust me, that would have been enough time. Ryan Cash, I get really confused about Mount Button. He is like Marmite. People either love him or hate him. Is he a good thing, bad thing, or somewhere in between? He's a good politician. He's a half-decent flotilla leader of destroyers. He's promoted massively because of his familial connections in wartime, so that he starts out World War II as a destroyer captain and not a very senior one of that, and rises up dramatically because of his connections. He's also a bit not that good at the military side of things. Andrew Cox, critical base. Were the RN guilty of the same with Singapore, or did other bases lessen the criticality? No, the bases around the defenses around Singapore were very good. The trouble is, and I've gone into this, I've done a whole episode on Singapore. The trouble with Singapore, and the reason it falls, is because the Royal Navy's taking care of its section, protecting from the sea, and the Army's not really taking care of its section, protecting from the land. And as I've pointed out, there were various options, but you needed a supreme commander out there to coordinate things, who was actually able to be a supreme commander, and who could basically get rid of some of the army officers if they were being really, really stupid. Sam Merkialan, giving priority to teaching and not YouTube? I'm shocked. I know. It's almost as if one pays the bills. Turning 3434. Would it really be that easy to really hurt the Pearl Harbour oil reserves? I understood that you probably need to bomb every tank separately. That is always one of the theories, but actually you just need to take out the pumping station. If you consider the sheer amount of oil that needs to be moved to get to the ships, and the pressure it needs to be moved at, and the fact is that taking out the tanks, yes, that causes a lot of trouble, because that burns up the oil, but the oil you can replace. The pumping station is far more complicated, and you have to do a lot more work, because if that starts a fire in the fuel lines, you then have to replace all the fuel lines. Alphendon, decisive blow would never happen against a serious industrial power. Just a question of building more, e.g. UK post-Dunkirk or Soviets moving beyond Urals. Taking Hawaii might have, but then illusions. There are all sorts of issues, but yeah. Andrew Cox, Stan Freeman. I was thinking of a strategic pre-war planning. Sending 4C to Singapore was just silly. Yeah, there was a lot of work pre-war. 4C... well, it's also a product of 2 years. Remember, 4C happens after 2 years of war, after the Royal Navy's lost Courageous, Glorious, and Ark Royal, and has had Illustrious and Formidable damaged. It's just, no. Strub, do you think the US senior leadership failed to understand the new tech? That's debatable. That is debatable. Peter Dawson, the US put their fighters in the center of airfields to prevent sabotage, but then made them easy picking of strafing by enemy aircraft. They put their bombers and their fighters in the center of airfields. In Car, RAF over Singapore and Malaya were very limited and obsolete. Yeah. Again, they had enough aircraft that with fighter direction, and if they'd been concentrated more, they probably could have done quite a good job. Because again, the aircraft, the Japanese are... There is often a misunderstood of what aircraft were actually involved in the strikes on Singapore and what Japanese aircraft were actually available. Turning 3434, fair point. Taking out the pumping station would take months to fix, but considering how much hardware they pulled in to raise the battleships half a year, and worst case, you'll start hauling fuel with buckets. Well, think about this one. Think about all the equipment brought in to repair the BBs. But the fact is, you can't supply that equipment with fuel unless you get the pumping station fixed first. It's going to be a couple months. It's going to delay everything else, and that's going to make more damage. So let's look at the diplomacy. What was the diplomacy going on? Well, there's all sorts of arguments going on, and it comes down to Tojo Hideki, who's the Prime Minister of Japan, 1941 to 44, but at this point in the negotiations is the Minister of War, the sort of army minister. And basically, there are debates going backwards and forwards. America's demanding concessions. They've banned Japan from using the Panama Canal. That hasn't worked. They've tried to limit the sale of scrap metal to Japan. That's caused issues because why is scrap metal useful? It's useful to making bullets. But the big thing is oil. Because believe it or not, America supplies 80% of Japanese oil. Now here's the problem. That is considered by many in America the big ace in their sleeve. This will make Japan have to come to heel. Have to do what we say. But it's also a bit of a blunt instrument. You do a total embargo, then they try and buy some from the Dutch. The Dutch can only supply about a third of what the Japanese would like. So you've backed Japan into a corner. Now, I'm not sure about any of you, but I grew up with a family, despite living in Britain, who do like to talk in terms of hunting metaphors and farming metaphors. And in there, one of the things is, there is nothing more dangerous than a wounded animal. I.e., if you are backing something into a corner and it can't get out, expect it to lash out. It's also one of the reasons why you're taught never to stand over a dog and reach over their head. If they jump up at you, it's literally because you have loomed over them. You are forgetting they are a dog, not a human. They don't have your understanding. This is not calling the Japanese dogs or anything like that. What this is saying is America is looming over them. Japan doesn't understand that America is going to use this power and then not invade or attack them. America is just using this power to try and break them, so they'll completely give way and agree to it. Japan sees this as the opening move to an action which is going to destroy Japan. I.e., just because you think your move will be interpreted in one way doesn't mean the other thing, the other person or animal or whatever, is going to interpret it that way. You have to apply a judgment when you're doing these things. It's one of the interesting things when we're talking about the current Brexit negotiations between Britain and the European Union. Depending on which side you're on, both moves by either one can be portrayed as being both reasonable and completely unreasonable. Because in the end, you are relying on them interpreting your move. I.e., we take an example, current act going through Parliament, which allows the British government, it appears, to break an agreement which they have with the European Union. Now, why is the British government putting that act through those lines in? Because they're worried about food trade between the rest of England, Scotland and Wales, and Northern Ireland. They're worried about the trade going that way. Why did the European Union want the act it wanted in? Well, because part of the Northern Ireland Agreement means there is functionally no border in terms of commerce between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which is still part of the European Union. So as far as the European Union is concerned, that means Northern Ireland is part of the European Union trading area still, and Britain is out of it. But of course, Northern Ireland is part of Britain. So it gets, both sides are being ultimately reasonable in terms of understanding their things, and completely unreasonable in terms of the other side. It's welcome to international relations, and welcome to the issues you have with Japan in the run-up to Pearl Harbour. You have back to this nation back corner. Yes, your presumption is they will attack the Philippines. Why? Because you think they're going to go after Singapore, Malaya, and the Dutch territories for oil. However, your entire battle plan is based on them attacking there and then you attacking aggressively with your fleet and hammering them. Hence, you have based your fleet in Hawaii. Why, in the name of all things holy, do you not presume that your enemy can read your movements just as well as you can, and therefore will think, hang on, the enemy fleet is in Hawaii. That is what will hammer us if we hit the rest. So therefore put an emphasis on taking out the enemy fleet, or on your taking out your fleet. It's a failure to think like the enemy, or at least allow the enemy some sort of independent thought. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, at this point, if this is August, September, and I've said Taranto technically is November 1940. This is August, September 1941. Sorry, I've written 1940 up there. Doink. Again, if at this point you've backed someone to go, it's kind of like Britain with a lot during this year and earlier last year. There were issues with Iran and the Straits of Hormuz and them blockading ships, and them capturing freighters and capturing oil tankers and these sort of things. And Britain's now had to since then keep two ships pretty much on station in the Gulf. And they already had one forward based out there, but they've now had to pretty much keep a second one out there the whole time. This was because Britain intercepted an Iranian flag vessel elsewhere in the world. A British ship gets captured before they have a second ship out there. Why? Because they presume that Iran won't do anything. That they'll be able to act with impunity. You cannot do that. You have to always assume your opponent will react and treat them as an opponent. Don't treat them as they're going to be some sort of victim of you who's going to be standing there taking whatever you dish out to them, because they're not. Right, let's see. Kevin McTaggart. It seems to me like BBs were older and thus seemed to do the US a favour. However, the death of sailors was not no good. Also, the Japanese lost 29 aircraft and 5-minute subs on surprise attack, so it was on blood list from them. Nope. Pardon me. Tony 3434. And if 80% of Japanese oil is not shipped to Tokyo, send those ships into Pearl. It's how Rabil operated. Dev Squad. In 1941, the US is the world's biggest oil producer by far. Yes, and quite a lot of that oil is being sent across. Here's the thing. It's going to sound terrible, but actually the oil embargo actually helps another country out quite a lot, because there is one country currently shouting out for a whole lot of oil across the other side of the Atlantic. Hello! We could really use some. That treatment, I mean, it was a mere 18 months old by the time Pearl Harbour, but as Admiral King demonstrates, not all Americans are happy to learn from British, and the US didn't even have an air force. And the US Army Air Corps is not a bad air force. In fact, they're a very organised group in many ways. Ian Carr, 4C was thought of by the British as a fleeting being. No, it was thought of by Churchill as a fleeting being, not the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy were not really keen on 4C at all as an idea. Kematanga, did Japan lose about 1/4 of their attacking aircraft this time? Could Japan make up for losses? No, Japan lost 29 out of several hundred attacking aircraft, so no. They lost about 1/10 of their attacking aircraft. Actually, maybe 1/12. Well, 2/33, or 3/35. 3/35. Dean Carter, thoughts on War Plan Orange book? It's very good. I have it around me somewhere. I do enjoy War Plan Orange book. I've got it in. I think it's in a 4 random books as well. I'm not sure if that's come out yet. Kevin Tonic, one of the big things is the US could read Japan's diplomatic code. Could Japan read US codes? Some of them. Japan had quite a good intelligence gathering service. Hello, Stephen White. Earthborn, no. Even if Japan didn't think the US was going to invade them, agreeing to US demands would make them look like a third-rate power, reliant on the US to do anything. Japan would never agree to that. King, US shot down 29 aircraft during attack and had 20 constructive losses due to battle damage and hard landings. In car, surely NATO navies could cooperate in the Straits of Hormuz. Which NATO navies are there? This is the old question here. It's yes, they can cooperate, but they actually have to be there to cooperate. And if you look at the Straits of Hormuz and Persian Gulf, the only two allied Western navies which permanently have ships in the region, don't just have them visiting, and large gaps, are the British and the Americans. That's mainly because we are the ones who are the powers who protect quite a lot of the flagged vessels which go through there. And that doesn't mean those vessels are necessarily of our flag, but they're of our flag or of those flags and nations we protect and guarantee, i.e. Panama or Isle of Man. Stephen White, put in my USS Arizona model in the computer room, because yesterday was 79 years since the attack. Also, got my zeros lined up and got my Princess of Wales waiting too. Cool. Ian Carr, did the UK stockpile significant oil at Singapore? Yes, huge amounts. There are huge amounts of oil stockpiled at Singapore, in Australia, in Trimcomley. It's one of the interesting things in World War II that, as far as the war in the Far East goes, Britain has huge oil supplies and pretty much doesn't really need to buy any. That's one of the naughty little things in World War II that people often forget, that most of the British forces in the Far East, it's more about moving oil around rather than acquiring more oil. Not here, everyone. One of my favorite things is the USA is thinking from 1938 till December 7th. Japan never hit Pearl Harbour, even though. Recent time, no talk could be dropped in a harbour because of how shallow it was. Unfortunately, again, November 1940 had kind of shown that, because Taranto is about as shallow, if not in places shallower, in some places slightly deeper, than Pearl Harbour. Hello, Jeff. Ron Cash, were the Americans blindsided by their own xenophobia like British and Singapore? We've been over this. I think there are some who are xenophobic, but honestly, both the British and the Americans actually have quite a good idea of what the Japanese are capable. The British in Malaya are just The British in Malaya have too confused a command structure and are not prepared to do what needs to be done. As we've been over before, what needed to be done was an ordered evacuation down to some lines of defense to defend Singapore, and the rest of Malaya could easily be abandoned as long as you could control Singapore. Singapore was realized it was at a threat, and honestly, the amount of defenses Britain puts into Singapore, in comparative, considering its importance versus the American importance of Pearl Harbour, are significantly more. But the thing is, you have to remember the British forces available at Singapore are not their first-line forces. They're not even the forces which are based there normally in peacetime. Britain has been at war for 2 years by the time Pearl Harbour happens. By the time Pearl Harbour and Singapore happens, at that point, quite a lot of those the better British troops are in North Africa, have been taking part in operations in Europe, in Iran and Iraq, all sorts of places. There are British forces have been operating. So the British forces available in Malaya are really not the best troops that the British have available. Whereas the troops which Japan sends down to Malaya aren't possibly their best, but aren't their worst by a long shot. Whereas Pearl Harbour theoretically has the Americans' best in it. He says theoretically. Australia, what's the US capacity for refueling at sea in the Pacific at the time? Not as massive as it would become. JP, after what was the point of the American diplomatic effort versus Japan? What were they trying to get Japan to do? Withdraw from China and stop being a threat to American interests in the Far East. Basically, they were trying to humble Japan by diplomatic means. $29 shut down plus 20 constructive losses, about 50. 6 carriers launched, 360 aircraft, so roughly 536s, 14%. Okay. Dunricama, do the torpedoes drop down a bit and launch, then hit your cruise depth? Actually, torpedoes tend to, if they are not... The reason why the British have the tension wire system is because without the tension wire, they tend to do that, which means they come in, they dive, and then they have to come up to their operating depth. If you have the tension wire, it means they belly flop and they don't go as deep before rising up. Kevin Dagger, if memory serves correctly, Texas was one, if not the biggest oil producers. Yes, it was. And it wasn't just America which was the source of the high-octane fuel. Britain, they're coming out of refineries in Canada as well. That's what a major point to remember as well is the Japanese had been in a land war for the last 5 years by the attack on Malaya. The troops attacking were experienced in a way the UK's weren't. Well, yes, but also the troops who... Let's put it this way. If the Japanese forces had been engaging the Indian soldiers who'd been there in peacetime and the Gurkhas who were there normally, and the Highlanders and the other units which were normally in Malaya and in Singapore, and the generals who were normally there, you would have had a far different scenario. Because also you have to remember, it's not considered an active war zone, and the army has all these active war zones. There is no Carson de Wiet out there. There is none of the officers who you'd want out there. Let's be honest. If you'd had him available and could have deployed him, if you'd had Carson de Wiet out there in charge of the British forces fighting the Japanese, they would have been fighting a very different general who would have been completely happy to do whatever was necessary to be done, in probably including setting half of Malaya alight to burn them alive in the jungle. Mm-hmm. Turning 3434. Bad news, though. I'm only halfway through this week's bilge pumps with the wonderful Steve George. Good news, I still have an hour and 20 to enjoy. And do enjoy. And you have another episode coming out tomorrow. Hello, Runcash. So, here is the route. Now, the point is, this is not the easiest journey in the world. And you have the Kita Batai moving along. Theoretically, there are American aircraft out doing reconnaissance and long-range maritime air patrol from the Aleutians, from Hawaii, from Wake Island, from Midway Island. And yes, the Japanese are very, very careful. But honestly, if you had, let's say, I don't know, gone onto a standard set of alert, and you'd had up those patrols at all, you should have spotted them. If those patrols are acting at anything like a normal rate, even at the rate they were acting, the fact that the Japanese managed to not get noticed at all is tremendously lucky. Okay? All this... their radio transmissions don't get picked up. Nothing gets heard of them. First thing you'd have thought, well, there's all these Japanese ships disappeared. Where have they gone? You'd expect American intelligence to have picked that up. They do pick it up, but they don't know where they are, and they don't at all. Here's the thing. A major enemy task force, potential enemy task force, has disappeared. Really? Do we know where they are? No. Okay. Do we have a major concentration of force which could be attacked? Yes, we do. Let's go to alert then. Sorry, this is the one point where it does sound like a conspiracy theory, but it really isn't. It's just people just not putting two and two together. JP, what made the US think they could humble Japan in 1941 since efforts by Russia in 1904 and China in 1894 had failed in outright war and defeat for them? Because we're America. Mm-hmm. Code Fate 190. Would skip bombing be better than torpedoes and Pearl Harbour? If you had a decent enough armor-piercing bomb, potentially. Ian Carr, many Indian Army units were fighting in North Africa in 1941. Yes, and those ones were all the Indian Army units which had been well-trained during, the interwar years. Gahedron, also Mad Jack Churchill. Basically clone both those and you have an interesting World War II. And Slim. If Bill Slim wasn't available at the time too. No, he was in Iraq. Deciding that. The thing is, but he'd been as part of the Indian Army prior to that, so if you hadn't had, it's going to sound strange, you always have to remember the team that's fighting the Japanese when they initially invade is not the team which is Britain's first choice. They're the team which is, these are the people available. Andrew Cox, in Russell Brandon's book, Naked Island, he relates how they weren't allowed to train on the land with their field guns in case they damaged the rubber plants on the plantations. There are all sorts of various things like that. You find they still managed to find a way to get the training done. So this is a very long journey. They do it though. Austin Harmon got some brew last week. Only cost just shy of $100 for 24 500ml bottles. My wallet is in pain. Worth it. I'm glad. Peter Dawson. They were too far north on the outward leg to be detected from Midway. I agree, but then they are actually in the area for the Aleutians. Especially when you consider, and this is one of those things, you always have to remember the way these map projections work. They make the northern latitudes, they sort of stretch and compress the southern latitudes. So, yeah. Jeff Miller, short excuse. 1, sabotage was the big threat. 2, going to alert constantly would have hidden training. 3, the USN was responsible for long-range detection of attackers. 4, he lacked resources. Yeah. In car, Bill Slim had been badly injured in the East African campaign in January 1941. Still in the Iraq. He was still in the Iraq campaign, so he wasn't that badly injured. He managed to get involved in that. But his book's another one always worth reading. And I think I've already discussed, put it in 4 random books. But, it's always a good book to read. When you realise, basically, he has the remarkably inventive idea of, I don't know, let's just do something which they don't expect us to do. JP, what were the US patrol patterns around Hawaii? What directions were they looking in? Part of the problem was lack of air traffic control. No one knew when or where the B-17s were coming in from. That is, again, an overblown statement sometimes. The B-17s, of course, could arrive at any point, but the fact that you're turning your radar off and the fact you're not doing... It's not so much air control as just someone getting on a radio and going, hello, B-17s, is that you? And these are things which could have been done if you got properly organised. At any point, there are lots of options for setting up a command and control system for Pearl Harbour, for Hawaii. It's a fairly obvious thing, but no one gets on with setting it up. In 1941, Sim was too junior and unsung for command and needed for the Middle East. He gets command in 1942, but quite early in 1942. But I would argue that in that sort of period, there are many other officers, Jeff. The fact is, though, they're all in service elsewhere. This is the point I keep making. And the fact is that just because someone's busy doesn't mean that there aren't other good officers available. The fact is you'd have had to take them from somewhere. And where do you want to take them from? Do you want to strip North Africa of some good decent officers? Do you want to strip commandos from these officers? You've had Norway in 1940. That's blooded a fair number of officers. You've had Northern France. You've had East Africa. You've had all sorts of operations that you've had to use officers for, and it wears them down. Hello, Anna Clinton. Why not send service forces in with Marines and engineers to at least demolish everything, e.g. dry docks? If they could have held Ford Island for a few months. Well, the point is that to do that, and this is the thing you have to remember. I do often point out that, frankly, if they had wanted to, there is an option to do that, but it already requires a lot of logistics to get the force they do out there, and ashore there is an infantry division, which is, well, no, there's two infantry divisions. There's the 24th and 25th Infantry Division. So I wouldn't call them the most formed up units. Both include regiments of Hawaiian Territorial Guard. But they're not bad. And that means if you've got two divisions roughly ashore with lots of coastal artillery, you're probably going to need quite a significant force to get ashore. Plus, there are also Marines ashore, and there's also the Marines who have about 3 defense battalions and an engineering battalion. So actually, that's what? 6 brigades equivalent? No. 7 brigades equivalent? Yeah. You're going to need quite a large force to do it. FB alert. In 1941, Hawaii and Malaysia are considered training bases, not potential war zones. Malaysia is considered a potential war zone, but it's hoped that you can deter war, and it's hoped that Japan... Britain's not really keen on America's policy in terms of the fuel thing, but they can't really do anything about it. B-17 was not designed to be carrier-based. There are lots of issues with bringing extra people along. Right. So, morning options. USS Condor spots a midget submarine at 0342. Here is the thing. This is 0342 on the morning. We've spotted a midget submarine. Alert the ships. Deploy the torpedo net. Start deploying torpedo nets. There are lots of things. Okay, yes, I can see you not shouting a great big air alert, but if you spotted a midget submarine trying to get in, and your torpedo nets are still not deployed, why? Why are you not immediately going, hang on, midget submarine's trying to get in? And also, if there's a midget submarine there, where's it come from? Midget submarines need a mother. But no. Okay. They think it might not have been anything. They think they might have mistaken identity. We can accept that. However, 0637 hours. A submarine is actually sunk by USS Ward. Okay. 2 midget submarines now. Where have they come from? Why are you not Why are you not starting to deployment of torpedo nets? Okay, it takes a while, but you could still get some across, and that would have really helped the battleships, which couldn't get moving. And at this point, someone's making a concerted effort. Go to a partial alert? But no, they don't. Radar intercept. So, General Short has, because of restrictions of fuel and supplies, and because he's not really the most keen on radar, he doesn't place that much trust in it. He's restricting it to 4 hours a day. They're approaching from the north. A unit like the one pictured picks up aircraft coming in, and their report's not acted on. They're told to turn off, and 50 minutes later, the enemy aircraft attack Pearl Harbour. So that would have been 50 minutes alert. That would have been 75 minutes alert. That would be 4 hours and 10 minutes alert. For all of them, actually, you can see the logic. Don't ask me, don't get me wrong, but a midget submarine, you would expect multiple midget submarines to be used. They've been launched. But the whole point is, the moment you've got midget submarines trying to get in your force, you are at war. War is happening. Why are you not changing to a war footing? This is my question. And the reason they're not is because it hasn't been officially declared. So they don't want to make that decision. They don't want to jump into that because they're worried about overstepping the civil-military relationship. Good story about these is that even one of them, their only means of telling high command is to get on a motorbike, race down to a nearby shop, I think it is, use the telephone in the shop to phone the control center. So yeah, this is no chain home scenario. And the one in the Philippines, in contrast to this, is on 24 hours a day being looked after by 3 shifts. But here's the point. Pearl Harbour, Hawaii, is important enough. They send 4 units, plus they have a 5th spare. They've sent 5 units of radar. So someone considers it very important and high risk. But then someone else decides we've only got enough fuel to operate it for 4 hours a day. We've got all these fuel supplies. We've got the whole of the American Pacific Fleet sitting here. Pretty much every battleship in the US Navy that's worth anything. We've got all these fuel supplies. We've got all these Marines, troops, bombers, everything here. But 4 hours a day. I'm going to have to go get more water in a second. Just no. No. It's just no. Ian Carr, were Hawaiian Islands other than Oahu militarized in any way? They had some of radars put around. They didn't even close the harbour gate till after the first wave. Nope. Code Fate 190. How do you know if it's a midget submarine versus a regular submarine? The size of the explosion. Jeff Beeler. To me, the US should have been doing practice intercepts on all incoming flights from mainland and honing their air defense system, not leave it in charge of things on a Sunday morning. That would have been sensible. Not even of all part attack subs. What kills me is why that wasn't battle station, wasn't placed to all forces. I have no idea. That's good. Don't forget, between the first and second midget subsequent sightings, they open the harbour gate nets and don't close them until after the first wave has begun returning home. Jeff here, Drac and Jingles point out that the USN opens fire from all ships in less than 10 minutes. Oh, yeah. That's great. They do open fire in less than 10 minutes. That's brilliant. I'm not sure about it, but I seem to remember even the gentleman without radio warning at Taranto opened fire pretty much immediately they hear aircraft. You know. That's good. You've got a typo on USS Condor slide. This appeared at this point. Sorry. You can always tell when a dyslexic has been typing stuff up. Fast. No, come on. How can the Narvik invasion Norway with commanders not willing to start a war? Potentially. Andrew Cox, even if war hadn't been declared, you could have cancelled the Sunday inspections. That would at least have meant the ships were watertight. Just sound an alert. Earthborn Gnome, the operator's wedding was supposed to be there. They got off at 7 but stayed for the breakfast truck. The Encarta, 5 SCR 270s had also been sent to the Philippines. Fairly sure it's only one unit which has got to the Philippines at this point. There are 4 more on their way, but only one unit's got to them. I think as the book I was reading, which was Radar in the Pacific, which again is somewhere around here. Has the stream dropped? I hope it hasn't. I don't know. But I think I did mention the phone already. So, the report's not acted on, and this is what you end up with. Just not fun. Jeff Beer, Short had most of his planes in maintenance mode, adding 40 minutes to their prep time and flight time. Yes, but 50 minutes warning. 40 minutes prep time. I don't know. Also, in the nicest way, let's say this gets out, you have plenty of time prep time. So what would have happened? This is the point. This is the point of what I'm looking at and talking about, is if what would have happened. So first, let's consider what did happen. This is the list of the loss. That's the picture of Pearl Harbour. That's the attack. They lose an ex-battleship. They lose all these other battleships, get damaged. Many of them entered back in service, but some don't. You have the actual Rear Admiral Isaac's flagship, Battleship Division 1, gets... Arizona is lost. Pennsylvania is severely damaged. It's in dry dock with Downs and Cassin, and they both get damaged as well. It's always fun when a battleship gets hit in dry dock, but that is what happens. Two waves. of aircraft. 2 waves of aircraft. Vision, listening at work while placing new coffee machine in 60 hotel rooms. You're echoing down the empty hallway of the hotel. I'm glad to be of service to the hotel. Thunder a complete cluster Mountbatten. Could have been. In fact, I think Mountbatten could have possibly done a better job, actually. Because you see, the thing is, I would argue that the officers in charge. Okay, you can have 2 forms of senior officers, and both can be quite useful in this scenario. You can have a political officer like Mountbatten, who, whilst he's not good at the military side of things, because of his innate empire building style, will always be wanting to get the most and newest equipment for his command, so will always be badgering for it, i.e. MacArthur. And will tend to use it because that makes them look good in their mind. Or you can have a commander like Cunningham, who basically considers the enemy to be as intelligent as himself, so often tries to think like, if I was the enemy, how would I attack this? And if he can't think about how he would new technology, finds an expert to tell him how they would attack it with that new technology. So that's your 2 stars officers. The commanders at Pearl Harbour don't fit in either of those categories. And that's the trouble. So that's one of that's a really interesting thing. Again, I've had to say something nice about Mountbatten, but it's honestly true. Mountbatten in charge would have resulted in all those radars being on, and him taking plenty of photographs with those radars being on. Probably him manning a radar because it's the latest technology. There would have been all sorts of things going on, and mostly because the officers would be complaining about him being annoying, they'd have been on alert because. The radar report, as Jeff Beal and many others point out, was responded to was because it was attributed to the B-17s. But no one sends up anything to check if it's the B-17s. So, would the Japanese strike have been any more effective if they'd focused on the fuel storage at Pearl? Not really, but it would have been more interesting. It'd been quite interesting. Alex Jacobs, please refer to Uncle Drax's excellent 3-part. Well, I have mentioned Drax's excellent 3-part series on Pearl Harbor. I mentioned at the beginning, and actually, I said one of the things I said was, I think, at least I intended to say, and I hope I did remember to say, was that that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the Pearl Harbor talk I am doing, because next year we might do a deep dive on Pearl Harbor as Bilgepumps, rather like we did on Taranto. And this, in many ways, has structured how we've approached it this year in case of me and Drac. King's Rook. That's quite a claim, but regarding the M-word, but an accurate claim, though. I know. Mountbatten is an interesting soul. Death Squad. How problematic was the USN policy of painting over old layers of paint rather than stripping down to metal and starting again? Heard layers of paint burn on some ships. They did. It wasn't quite good, that great. Cunningham sounds like a cunning fox. He was. He was cunning like a fox who was the professor of cunning at Oxford University. Jeff Elam, Mountbatten is a bad decision made quite quickly type of leader. Empire building means sick gets set up much early. Yeah. See what? No excuse for Manila. Japanese attack on Nichols delayed by fog. So B-17's force sits on the airfield with almost 100 fighters and no prep. MacArthur's biggest failure. December the 8th on the other side of Dateline. Yeah, fun times. One issue of the US military historically is that the Constitution has a specific clause that keeps the Army and Navy separate under the President's command, and only him. It is interesting times. Melanie 1640. No, but that's why it would be significant enough to describe as a cunning ham. I like what you did with that, Melanie. I do. That's good. Also, reassuming the radar signal in B-17s, the radar operators had seen B-17s coming in on the radar before, knew this wasn't B-17s, and said they didn't think it was. Yes, but higher command didn't understand that you could tell the difference between radar because they hadn't been working enough. It's one of the issues that are going on. Hello, Alex Jacobs. No worries. As I said, it's one of the great things. It's going to sound strange. This is going on tangent, but one of the great things about working in bilge pumps and doing the work we do in bilge pumps is sort of inadvertently we started forming a sort of trio that work together in different ways and almost produce. You almost can put the works together and they'll slot together and they'll give you a very interesting balanced perspective. And it's one of those things because we each do something slightly different in a style in a slightly different way. And if you put it all together, it comes out really quite cool. It's one of those fun things of bilge pumps is that we have a lot of fun with that. Paul from Chicago, with puns like that, we need to get Melanie into Discord. With puns like that, we need her in the Killick section of the Discord. Right. So, this is the IJN order of battle, and I want you to take notice of something very specifically. So, look at the supply trains. They're almost Royal Navy. It's impressed merchantmen. It's Kyoto Maru. It's Kenya Maru. Kyoko Maru. Shinoko Maru. Akebon Maru. Toho Maru. Teo Maru. Nippon Maru. Anyone would think the Royal Navy knew what they were doing taking on the Asma Maru. Mm-hmm. And you look at all this, there aren't many battleships. There aren't many cruisers. If that force had been forced to slow down and damaged in any way, they could have been in a lot of trouble. So this is the point about this, okay? The Americans have a large number of bombers. They have a large number of fighter aircraft on Hawaii. If they get to learn that the Japanese are coming in and they launch their bombers to attack, yes, maybe they cause damage, maybe they don't. But if they do cause damage and force that force to slow down, then the American battleships could have had a lot of fun, even though they can't go fast enough to catch up with the aircraft carriers in theory. In practice, when you've got all those destroyers, all those other merchant ships, everything working at the pace it can work, who knows? Vision. World War II magazine, in the latest issue, has an article explaining why MacArthur delayed B-17 attack. It was political. He was deferring to the Philippine government, which hoped Japan would avoid the island nation. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Basically, Maru can mean a defensive circle or a castle, as sort of defensive circles that protect castle, or it can also mean something which is beloved. It's often applied to ships as that. And in using divination, it represents perfection or completeness, or the ship as a small world of its own. So Maru is a complicated phrase, but it means a lot in Japanese. As I said, it can mean ship, but it has a more spiritual meaning. JPLS, Sean and Kim will go to high alert on US wars report and can do what I spotted. What can they do with no declaration of war, especially when they have been ordered not to provoke war? Well, start launching fighters. You can have an alert cap. They do have radar. They do have the beginnings of the system, and they do have enough air control. They could launch fighters, because one of the things which often isn't appreciated is whilst they have limited radar usage, part of the coastal batteries are Airwatch observer, like the British Observer Corps, who are part of the groups. And if they're activated and deployed, they will start sending in whistling aircraft, and you can launch your fighters. Andrew Cox, how could they cover that train with that few warships? They couldn't. That's good. While husband Kimmel was by no means perfect, to what extent was he thrown on the bus to protect others in both Navy Department and Department of War? Quite a bit. Carmen, has an RL lifeboat ever been sent to assist a military vessel? I think so. One. Given 4 hours and 10 minutes of battle stations to do BP right at the time, do you think the BP could have timed a beach or battle formation to protect each other? They could have got out to sea, and that would have made the Japanese job far harder. If those battleships had been out at sea for a couple of hours with their crews and everything else, Japanese aircraft turn up, there's nothing to hit. Where are the US Navy? Carmen, could you man some AA batteries permanently when at peace, though, with ammo ready? Yes, you can. In the nicest way, if you look at the Royal Navy practices in 1939, even before war starts, by about June 1939, every Royal Navy warship is pretty much operating on war standard footing. And that's what the Royal Navy is pretty much doing. John and Evans, how many warnings had the fleet had from the US government? Quite a few. Danny Phillips, what would happen to the Japanese force if they discovered while recovering the first wave by a squadron of patrolling angry Fletchers? Nothing good. And Carl Gasman, on BBs, on the other hand, ships sunk at sea would have not been salvaged. I agree, but also ships manoeuvring at sea would have been far harder to hit, and you'd have had to find them. Where would they have been? Would they have gone to the north, or would they have gone to the south and west? Would they have gone southeast? You would have to find them first. And this is the point. You would have to find them first. You can. I remember people wargaming Pearl Harbour attacking with US fleet at sea, and it was worse outcome for the Americans permanently losing BBs that were not salvaged. Potentially. But again, there's a slight difference in wargaming than there is in... How do I put this? In wargaming versus in the normal sort of fighting. And I have to say, this is from my own experience of watching wargaming and sometimes taking part. In some of the wargaming, you do have a god's eye view in the war. You do know where your enemy is. It can generate a false positive. Unless you are able to run enough space and enough floors, you can divide it so the enemy can't see you until contact is made. That's good. I think there was a level of paranoia at Ohio at the time. In ready use ammo for air guns was kept under lock with the CEO and not the duty officer, being the key holder. Yeah, that's a level of paranoia, which is really annoying. Andrew Cox, in 4.5 hours, 4 hours, 10 minutes. How far do they get up? Raise steam, unlock BBs, probably an hour or two, and then max 50 miles away, and with lots of stragglers following to lead them to the fleet? Probably not. And honest, commanders have so much less information than wargaming commanders. Yeah, they do. Javila, what was the Japanese plan for engaging active defense at Ohio instead of as opposed to a surprise attack? Not good. All the Japanese modeling and wargaming had presumed a surprise attack. Now, before I get into the next slide, I'm going to get some water because I've run out an iron brew, and I have my annoying. You have worked too hard. Here is a cough to remind you of when you were younger. Cough, come on. So I'll be back in a second. Right. Oh, it's changed side on me. So, pop that back. It's one of the things I will always have great respect for those people who've survived COVID, because considering my lifetime, I had whooping cough when I was very, very young, and I've always been left with a nice cough which comes on every time I overwork myself. Let's see. Anonymous, modeling imperfect information is difficult and not impossible, but generally awkward. Yep. So you might at 20 watts, still hard to locate them. They were due to leave for San Diego a Monday morning, and without the BBs, the far more important docks and fuel tanks would have gotten the attention. Yeah, but again, you can repair that docks actually slightly easier. A little bit of difference, Carl Gauser, between raising steam in plain turbine and turboelectric drives. A little bit, but not as massive. Anonymous and Wargame Commanders units always obey promptly and effectively, exactly as expected. Yeah, unlike reality, where the commander of each ship gets a vote. So does a watch officer, all the other people involved. And you never have things go mechanically wrong. Well, you do sometimes, but you have to simulate it. Jack Jacobs, how many US sailors, soldiers, and Marines were out on town from Sun Liberty? They were all home. They must have been out on Saturday night, but they would all been still back in the barracks where they're supposed to be. Otherwise, they'd have been AWOL and rounded up by the MPs. Jeff Ealer, raising steam dependent on ship. Nevada had a forward-thinking chief engineer who always had steam up in 2 boilers every morning. Calum Gasford, after I quit smoking and Gaz Jr. brings home each and every germ from school, I understand your position. Yeah, it's actually made worse for me because I usually find the best way to combat it is to keep very, very fit and go to the gym regularly. But because I live with 2 shielded people, I've not been going to the gym. So I've gone from an hour exercise a day down to, well, now I went down to nothing. I've now got an exercise bike and up to 40 minutes a day, but it hasn't kept my body going at the same level. Andrew Cox, why do you show B-17? As far as I know, the US Army Air Corps never hit a maneuvering ship from B-17. That is me, but let's talk now. Basically, my point is, if they tackled it early, when sort of at the Taranto or diplomatic time, they'd have had been able to pursue dispersed basing, maybe move to squadron of battleships back to San Diego. So they'd have split up their squadrons. That would have been a potential option. They could have increased the air defense or just coordinated it properly. Long-range air patrols, which is why I have a B-17 there, because as well as their bombing mission, they also would do long-range air patrols. They were often used for that. And whilst technically the Navy was supposed to take the lead with their Catalinas, the Army Air Corps was also getting involved in it. And more urgent on the technological adaptation. What would have happened, though? Well, the thing is, if the Japanese are seeing a stronger Pearl Harbour, does that change their plan? Might they launch the attack? Still launch the attack? They still might decide they have to. But they might also change their metrics and their rubrics for the operation. Either way, they'd have met far stiffer resistance, and they'd expected to lose far more. This is one of the problems with Pearl Harbour. The way it was acting made it very, very interesting. There's also the fact that the German and the Italian consulates are closed down in Hawaii, but the Japanese one is kept open and is allowed to stay open, which gives the Japanese Navy accurate data in real time about what the state of the US Navy is in Pearl Harbour. They're getting real-time data. That's something which makes a very big difference to their battle planning. If you close that down, yes, it would have been an aggressive act, but honestly, again, if you are if the situation is requiring you to ban oil from going to Japan when you supply 80% of their oil and all that money, then why isn't it justifiable enough to do that? Either way, and I do know it wouldn't have been a G, it would have been an earlier type of earlier B-17, which would have been doing the patrols, but frankly, the best photo I could find was of a G. Japila, so who opens fire first if the US is on alert? US, probably. Jeffrey North, hello. 1. Pearl Harbour attack was a tale of extremes. On the one hand, the Japanese developed and executed a brilliant tactical victory, but they gave themselves a strategic defeat. Yeah. So anyway, there was a Battle of the Bands the night before, and Arizona Band took second place, so got to sleep in the morning. They all were lost. And a Flinton, 2 sorts of officers. Good in peacetime, collegiate managers, versus good in war. Abrasive monomaniacs. Takes a while to transition. Note squad. Apparently, a not insignificant number of USN sailors had been picked up by the MPs. They were returned to barracks instead of being taken to the base brig. Yeah. Anyone think they're sensible? Sure, Mac. Level bombing really messes with carrier timetables. Could you imagine if B-17 strike hit the KB in between the first and second wave launch? It would have caused issues if there had been a B-17 strike. Or if there had been a B-17 strike before they managed to launch. Let's be honest, if they'd attacked something earlier Sunday morning, i.e. at night time, during the night, they would have probably achieved even more damage than they did during the day. Plus, you have to remember the Japanese carriers, like the American carriers, have wooden flight decks. So level bombing could have been interesting for them. Excuse me, I'm going to go blow my nose. That's better. It doesn't help that I've been now talking for about 10 hours today. Let's see. I'm enjoying doing it though, so it's worth it. And I have tomorrow off from talking, so. Let's see. Nick Waters, Spy Base. Sorry, consulate still open? I can see the diplomats hoping to keep channels like that open when things are bad, but bet Navy was screaming to close it. Yes. Vision, first B-17s we used in maritime patrol in the 1930s had side bubble windows like flying boats. Yeah. Which was where the waist gunners eventually were put, and the bubbles were taken off. Shomak, a night attack is what the RN would do. A night attack is what the RN would do. The Japanese did a dawn attack, but imagine that is the thing. So, here's the thing. If the attacks had been detected later, okay? If the warnings from Condor, Ward, from the what do you call them? The radar sets, the SBC 270s, had been taken and actually acted upon, 2/3 of the fighter aircraft were these things. The Curtiss P-36 Hawks. About 1/3 were those things, the P-40s, Warhawk. Tomahawk/Kitty Hawk versions. Earlier ones, just simply called the Warhawk. Later ones came in that had Tomahawk. Here's the thing. We all have discussed this, and I have explained this on often enough. In peacetime, we talk about killing the enemy. That is the joy of air defense. They talk about, oh, this will kill the enemy. In wartime, we'll settle for disrupting the enemy airstrikes. So about 30 aircraft get airborne. Nowhere near a full complement of fighters get up. Nowhere near a full complement of fighters, even though they've got distributed air bases and they've got a couple of aircraft for each one. You sort of go, why not 3 or 4? Why not 5 or 6? Why not a whole freaking squadron? And why are the pilots not there? Yes, they are worried about saboteurs. But you also have 3 defense battalions of US Marines there and 2 divisions of the Army there. You have plenty of soldiers. Use them. If necessary, trust your own Army Air Corps people with rifles and tell them to defend their air bases. It doesn't matter what you do, but disperse them and actually have them operate. Because if they could have got up, that's going to cause the Japanese a lot of problems. You've got torpedo bombers coming in. No torpedo bomber does good when it's engaged by fighters. None of them do. Especially when they can't get as low as they want to because they have to go over to actual terrain. These aren't swordfish. They aren't going to turn around and start taking you out because they go so slowly that you can't engage them. They're actually Japanese ones, which will go fast enough to actually be able to be attacked. Kahaman. Had all US strike aircraft on Pearl Harbour launched regardless if they carried any ordnance, if not enough, what would have been the result? It would have been interesting if they had had a warning, managed to get off the aircraft and launch them at the Japanese and, known where the attack was coming. That would have caused the Japanese problems. The Japanese would have had to modify their operations. Yes, they might not have lost any ships. Quite probably, especially against level bombing. But you'd have to burn up a lot of fuel, and there's always the chance that if there's enough level bombing going on, you might lose something. As Bitchin books, a Midway B-17 strike missed targets but was highly disruptive to Japanese operations. And as in Carr points out, Italians have hit very little in Med with high-level bombing of ships. Very, very little. One thing I learned recently, Canada actually declared war on Japan before even the US. I think they may have even been the first. That doesn't surprise me. The Canadians really do not have a tolerance for people who are disobeying the rules. Well, 12 of war. Pete also, the first point you have to remember, flying to Hawaii due to distances in the sea is difficult. Aircraft flying off course and coming in different directions will not be uncommon. No, it wasn't uncommon. But still, if you had a radar operating now, and this is the thing, again, if we go back to this one. So let's say you have this warning go, right, we've got this coming in. Set up a integrated air defense, something not probably chain home level, but something organized. And the moment you see bombers or any aircraft coming in, send up fighters, IEDs to go and inspect them. So let's say they have that running. And it's the radar notices them, 50 minutes. The alert fighters are launched. The pair of fighters, probably P-36s, go up. Go. There's a bazillion Japanese aircraft coming towards us, probably before getting shot down, or diving for the deck to try and get away. Or maybe diving into them to try and break up, because after all, if there's only 2 diving into those formations, where did the Japanese fire? They might hit their friends. So there's only 2 fighters, It's the classic scenario when there's only 2 versus hundreds of things. You dive in. You can't really fire, because if you do fire, you'll hit your friends, more likely you'll hit them. And then all the other fighters get alert and sent out. And yes, maybe it takes them 20 minutes to launch them all, but if you've got fighters, if the first wave gets hit hard enough, do they launch the second wave? And this is the point. If the first wave gets broken up enough, can the air defenses, which are on the ships, etc., actually take out the aircraft and actually do their job? That's good. I think the versions sent to UK were called Kitty Hawk and Tomahawks. The US called them Warhawk. Possibly. Pardon me. Jeff Healer, training needs trumped Operation Readiness. Well, that's at least officially. That's what the people like General Short harp on about. But honestly, General Short should have been shouting and screaming for more fuel. That's good. They even had an airfield that the Japanese weren't aware of. That doesn't surprise me. They had a lot of backup airfields. Earthworks and checkpoints. How is this so complicated for people? Because it requires you to actually think like you're at war. And this is, I think, the big problem with Pearl Harbor, is the US was acting in this warlike manner, consider the diplomacy, consider the fuel issues, but they were still thinking in terms of peacetime. They hadn't realized, well, Japan's been at war for 5 years already, so they're probably thinking in war mode. The rest of the world's at war already. Europe's in at war and has been at war for the last 2 years. Perhaps we need to be thinking in a war fighting mode. And you have a martinet jumping up and down the Philippines going, we're going to get attacked first. And yes, they will do, but you know. Attack Covert 4. P-36 is pretty terrible, but a Brewster Buffalo could down a Cape. Remember that most waves weren't zeros. This is the point. Zero is the one remembered, but there were other fighters there. There were the A5Ms, and there were still some of the A5s, the previous ones to zeros, there, and there were lots of aircraft which they could have taken out. And again, if you have enough fighters up there, the zeros are lightly armed and at the end of their fuel range, whereas these would have been launching up and had plenty of fuel. Vision. Were the fighters so based because of what the US had learned from the British success at raiding airfields in North Africa, or was it just good old paranoia? Good old paranoia. It's always good old paranoia. It is always good old paranoia. Vision. US Air Force security police were not yet formed. Came later in World War II to defend air corps bases. Yes, but they have lots of soldiers and military police. And civilian police if they want to use them. If the US is on alert, then the air battle is more like Coral Sea and Midway. More Japanese losses, maybe only one strike, not two. Pretty much. Tirpitz wasn't moving at the time that she was sunk by high-level bombing. And I think they were using a very, very large bomb. Bishop, Japanese Americans are very low, made up large part of Hawaii Territorial Guard, shipped to Europe to fight in early 1942. Yeah. And honest, in reality, the Japanese had more Nav Zeros on the first strike to handle the US land base there. Did they? Because again, the point is, you might have a lot of zeros. That's lovely. But again, are your fighters going to try and duck it around them, or are they going to dive into the bombers? And it's not a case of, oh, yes, we can handle them, but can you stop them reaching the bombers? Probably not. And if they break up the attacking formations, you have a problem. You've lost. Successful air defense is not necessarily about stopping the attack getting through, although that would be the ideal scenario. Successful air defense can be about breaking up the attack, so when the attack does reach the area it wants to hit, the air defenses have plenty of time to engage. And you don't overwhelm them. Peter Dawson. Second wave had already been launched by the time the first wave got to Hawaii. Yes, but it could have been called back. It might have still gone in, but could have been called back. Because who was the officer that flew the northern routes because before the Japanese did in anticipation of such an attack? I cannot remember the name, but I have heard the story. Carmen, if a squadron of P-36 went up, it's better than nothing, especially if Japan don't expect it. Michael Sanderson, hello. The trouble for the US was the isolationists held sway at this time. Yes, and actually believed other people would respect their isolation. This is the joy. If you're a neutral nation, you have to expect if you expect other people to expect your neutrality, whilst you're also still imposing massive sanctions on them. Because I do love it in that you read the reports, and some of those biggest isolationists are the ones who are actually arguing for the Americans to do the things they do with fuel relating to fuel to the Japanese. Jeff Midway without US carriers is how I think things would have gone. Attacks on Japanese ships, but no real damage, and lots of American planes shot down and less damage to the ships. Probably. Because if the US Pacific Fleet had survived, how would they responded? I did not read War Plan Orange. Well, at any level, they'd have probably had some more damage, but you'd have probably had a Battle of Midway where you'd have had a lot more, how do I put this, battleships as part of the force. You might with their air defenses, which also might have distracted people from targeting the aircraft carriers and diluted the attacks on the aircraft carriers, which means you might have had a basically Coral Sea would have probably been less of a loss for the Americans and less damage done to their aircraft carriers, which would have meant Midway they'd have had a stronger force for, which might have meant also they had more battleships for Midway, they'd had more battleship supports of Midway, which might also have affected the results of Midway. So if you reduce the damage even a little bit on the US Navy at Pearl Harbor, you could have a big impact on the whole war. You might have not even needed. And one of the interesting things is if you have the scenario where the battleships are in, so they get targeted more, so you have less strikes on the carriers or less focus on the carriers, and therefore the carriers survive longer, so you don't need USS Robin scenario. What does the Royal Navy do with HMS Victorious at that time? Or does HMS Victorious still come out, and then the Americans have a far stronger carrier force? It's all interesting stuff. Andrew Cox, Yogi Khan. Tirpitz was at anchor and was targeted by 2 specialist squadrons using tall boys. It's technically still level bombing, as Yogi Khan was, but it is kind of specialist. Trent Lenko. Hi, Dr. Clark. What have I missed? Yeah, some good stuff, I think. Jeff Miller, if US goes to alert and mitigates damage, how does this affect their post-December 7 operations, especially considering Kimmel is still in charge? It could be interesting. They might actually happen. They might, as I said, they would have more forces, but they'd also still have Kimmel in charge. So you might not end up with Nimitz in charge till 1942, later in 1942. Cal Gaspard, refighters, just look at how the few US aircraft historically got airmen. Quite a massacre. They did okay, but again, there's a very few and there's very little control and coordination on them. Seeing and White, still rather fight in P-40. Like the Wildcat, they were sturdy and head-on zero would lose. Claire Chanel warned against dogfighting zeros months before Pearl. Very salty. IJN had 40 plus zeros covering the first wave. If the USN can put up 200 plus fighters in the cap, then the IJN airstrike at least gets disrupted. That's a huge number. If I remember correctly, the US has the 14th and 18th pursuit groups. No, the 15th and 18th pursuit groups in the 14th pursuit wing, and they each have 4 squadrons. So there seems to be a debate about how many aircraft per squadron each one has at this time in World War II, beginning World War II, but you have quite a lot of aircraft. You know, if you have 8 squadrons and you're able to, let's say, activate just 2/3 of those aircraft, you are probably talking about, well, at least 100 aircraft being able to be airborne. And 100 aircraft, 100 fighters airborne is going to be a problem for anyone. It all depends on how well the US fighters were controlled. Up until Midway, US fighter coordination was pretty poor. Again, this is the point I made earlier. If you'd taken from this earlier scenario what happened at Taranto, what happened in the, you'd have starting some coordination with the radars would have been a basic thing you should have been doing. Chain home has been happening in Britain for a long time at this point. And Americans have been sending reports back. You could have set up something similar in Hawaii very easily. Covert 4, presuming they had some sort of halfish alert planes going on, they could have caused a lot of disruption. Every minute the ships have to batten hatches and bring engines and weapons is big. Yeah. And again, if the air attacks aren't, if the air attacks are disrupted, it's because the Japanese achieve quite so much, rather like the fleet air arm at Taranto achieve as much as they do, because those airstrikes are able to come in and all they've got to deal with is a one-dimensional threat, the air defenses. They don't have fighter deals. They're not being broken up. They can afford to form up outside of the air defense bubble and then go in. Japila, remember, the US Air Force does not have effective fighter command style operations this time. Actual interceptions might have been hit or miss. They still might have been, but if you have 100 aircraft airborne, which is it's a sort of rough estimate, I think that would have done something. In cars, some USS Enterprise Wildcats also put in an appearance. Well, that's going to add to the joys. Not a wolf. You're not being isolationist if you're trying to influence other nations. I mean, if you're not acting like isolation, you have to expect the possible consequences. Stop telling people to actually take notice of what they're doing. Jeffila, what kind of Pacific commander would Kimmel have been? Conservative, very, very conservative. That's anonymous, but probably a bad one judging of performance. But probably it would have been a very, very conservative commander, not taking any risks. Jack, presence of battleships in Coral Sea Midway battles may work as sponge to soak up Japanese strikes like North Carolina in Battle of East Solomons. Yep. Andrew Cox, if BB survived, would the USN have fallen into the trap of trying to force a battle line fight rather than converting to the carrier as the main weapon for a battle? The reason you can't really do that, and as the British will tell you, the reason you end up with a carrier war is because of the ranges. And as carrier aircraft get better and aircraft strikes get better, that's the thing. You're dealing with the range of the strikes. The British do have a few line of ship battles, but mostly those are caused where you have scenarios where the aircraft have already damaged the enemy and you can save the aircraft. So you can afford to go in with your battleships. Not a wolf. Add on to last. You're no longer neutral either. Serious cognitive dissonance going on at high levels. Welcome to politics. Bolivar. For big, slow-moving, and vulnerable targets, read torpedo bombers and level bombers. Again, they only have to disrupt the bombing attack, not wipe out the fighters. That's the point. King Crook, the US military brass and politicians at this time strike me as a lot of huge egos with a lot of with not a lot of situational awareness. There are a fair number going around like that. Joak, for me, the big unknown is the possible relief of Wake. That and keeping it may change a lot. Coral Sea was more like reaction to Japanese operations on our Bull New Guinea area. To an extent, yes. Jeff Beeler, do we have a map of the Japanese attack plan for Oahu? They were hitting multiple targets. The US fighters might defend their base, not the USN. Look what happens in the Philippines. I could agree with that, but also when they're coming in as a big strike, this is the point. If you have an air defense coordination set up of even a limited nature, you see that strike coming in at 7:02, you've got 50 minutes to launch a cap. So you'd probably have had your alert fighters go out and find out what's going on, and then you launch every aircraft you can to go and intercept them while they're still a big group. one. Other thing to remember is half BB battleships didn't get any damage. The shipyard work might be lighter as well. Peter Otterson, yes. Well, that is the whole story of USS Robin, as the Americans learned from her a bit about how to understand radar control and how to do fighter control. And there's an interesting duality which takes there, where the Saratoga gets all the attack bombers, the torpedo bombers, and the dive bombers get so concentrated in Saratoga. All the fighters get concentrated on Victorious. And the reason is the British one is better for that constant air control and constant air defense. And so the British basically take over the defense of the task group, and the Americans are the strike. So one carrier can concentrate on being the big alpha strike, whoop, everything go and whack everyone. And the other carrier can concentrate on being the shield and, oh, you need a fighter escort? Launched. There you go, there your fighters, go away and hit, and we'll provide the air defense. Nick Waters, the radar units are sometimes portrayed as new, low prestige postings, untrusted, often ignored. Not that simple, but still badly done. Too few new for senior officers to be used to them? Pretty much. John South, if the US Pacific Fleet hadn't been blundered Pearl Harbor, would the Japanese have been as aggressive in Dutch East Indies and Malaya? They might not have been. And also, remember, if the Pacific Fleet is still around, there's big battleships still floating around, you might well have a very different scenario with Force Z. You might well have a very different scenario going on with quite a lot of the fleet operations and what Japan can afford to put around. Deb Scott, with 50 minutes warning, the defending fighters have time to climb and be in tactically superior position to the attackers. It could have been a fairly one-sided fight. It could have been an interesting fight, definitely. Hello, Jared Barents. I don't think I've seen him before. Unfortunately, being a peacetime Sunday morning, the C team would be on watch, and anyone who would have the seniority or the ambition to do something would have been off. Quite potentially. Trent Talanko, on 27 September 1941, the 6 SCR-270 mobile raiders and their common information center controlling them exercised against a scenario near identical to the actual attack, and intercepted the incoming raid 25 miles away from Pearl Harbor's facilities. The CIC and its associated radios and radar were due to be fully turned over to US Air Force about 21st December 1941. This was a very classic case of too little, too late. There was many things going on too little, too late. Vision, I have read the Japanese attack plan got messed up by the attack commander. He ordered an official plan B, reducing the effectiveness of the attack. There was all sorts of weird things going on there. See what Drac did good on salvage free parts. Sorry, realized how important the floating dry dock holding the shore was. Successfully holding shore was successfully salvaged and quickly returned to a useful asset. Yes, many of the things were. Anyway, I'm going to be naughty, and I have to say I am going to save my voice by not going on for too much longer. So I'm going to say another 10 minutes, and then I'm going to finish for the evening. I'm sorry. I know I normally do about 3 hours, but I'm going to cut this a bit short this evening, so I hope you don't mind. So about another 10 minutes of questions. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's been watching. Thank you to everyone who's liked. Thank you to everyone who's on Discord. Thank you to everyone who's subscribed to the channel. Thank you to everyone who does super chats. Thank you to everyone, basically. But as said, I am saving the voice a bit. As said, I managed to get worn down. It's not advisable to be having to get up at 6 a.m. in the morning to let in builders to your house to fix things in the garden for the garden shed, and only going to sleep at 3 a.m. and do it for an entire week and a half on a row, and your body gets run down. But I am looking forward to Thursday, which is going to be the cruisers that weren't built. Dear that's the problem. There are too many might be's to really predict this. You can reasonably argue almost any outcome. You can do. Dunraganima, no need to apologize. Don't overwork yourself. Yes. Unfortunately, I'm a workaholic, so that comes pre-planned. Squad, do you mean the launching of the second wave? Apparently, none of the attacking pilots backed them up. The first group of attackers saw the flare, but also saw the fighters didn't respond. Probably. Buckmere, good idea. You're sounding a bit rough. Thank you. Trentolenko, the USN was looking at an Essex derivation in June 1945 with 4 catapults and angled flight deck to get Royal Navy-style fighter defense and keep out strikes. It was dropped at the end of the war. It would have been an interesting aircraft carrier. King's Rook mutters about the inadvisable deployment of Canadian soldiers to Hong Kong and not making sure the Yanks don't nick their gear. Yeah, so many issues. Alea Libra Insfride. Hello, whoever you are. I'm not sure what that means. Save your voice for another video. I will do. Andrew, there's great discussion. I have to admit, I thought about from the title, it was going to be about how salvaging to standards could have ultimately been a waste of resources. Oh, it was. It was. But this was me sort of looking at going, I want people to understand how lucky and how good the Japanese were, because often we talk about this attack and we just go, well, the Americans are completely unprepared. But you look at it, the Americans had so many opportunities to be prepared that if they'd done any of them, the Japanese attack would not have gone as well as it did. So the Japanese get a really good, strong, a really long ring of good luck. Jermac, as someone who's remotely teaching, I understand the voice issue. I'm speaking a lot more than in normal time. I know. Seriously, remote teaching is just you talk non-stop, and you can't get time off it from it. And you can't make the students do as much teaching as you normally do, because some of them don't want to turn on their cameras. Germany. Oh, well, hello. A Libra, Alea Libra ins Fries. Germany. Let's see. Benjamin, I wonder if surviving battleships guarding the Pacific coast, Pearl Harbour, could have played a useful role at Midway for the USN. If there'd been more battleships around, they might have been useful. Thank you, Earthborn Known. If I ever find my way to Pearl Harbour, you'll buy me lunch. Ooh, that'd be nice. I might be there. Andrew Cox, so not salvaging was a missed opportunity. Now, that could be an interesting debate. It could be. Jeff Beeler, Canadians deployed to Hong Kong using peacetime standards, which mean men and equipment sail separately, and the most cheapest way. Yeah. Wonder Wolf, no need to apologize. Thank you. Dep Squad, thank you. All right. All right, then. So thank you very much, everyone. Take care. And as the questions seem to have finished up. So I'll just say thank you very much. Concentration. Japanese lucky military affairs is consistently in power until 1943, mostly because of who they're facing, and what they managed to achieve early on. But yes, it is true. They do get a lot of luck. Carmen, yes, salvage standards, newest and easiest to repair, as it would give escort battle fleet, but not all like they did. Yep, potentially. King's Rook. Night. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. All right, then. Thank you, Stephen White. Thank you, Gahedron. Take care, Andrew Cox. Thank you, Kevin McTaggart. Thank you, John Shea. Alea Libra Ins Free. Take care, Dan Rakaha. Dirt Squad. Thank you. Take care. Thank you.